How's it going, guys? Palomore here, and this is my Cat Flex. I'm a much higher rated player than my Cat Flex, and that could be because I use macros. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be looking at a very basic Shadowlands PvP macro guide. Let's hop into it. Okay guys, so before we get too into it, I just want to let you know I'm going to leave timestamps in the description below that can show you all the different kinds of macros, but the video itself should be pretty short and easy to kind of skip on through. Anyways, we're going to start off with a very basic macro that almost every single player in the game that's PvPing can benefit from, and these are focus macros. So to set up a focus, you can right click on your target or yourself or whatever, and you click set focus. So obviously that might seem kind of inconvenient in a PvP situation, so you can actually macro this by just making a macro that says /focus, and then I've keybound it to 4, so whatever my target is when I hit 4 becomes my focus. Thanks, Cat. What you can do, now that you have a focus target, is you can actually make macros that will apply specifically to your focus target. So let's say, for example, I'm in a 2v2 game, and let's say there's two different players. Let's say there's a druid and a rogue. I can set my focus on the rogue and be targeting the druid. And what this can do is, like, let's say I have a macro that will blind my focus target. I can keep attacking the druid and keep targeting the druid and just hit that macro and it will blind the rogue. I don't need to switch my target and actually blind. This is why focus macros can be so effective and help you to play well. So let's go ahead and we'll break down a focus macro. Okay, so here is a basic focus macro kind of layout. I've just used placeholders here by putting spell name. What you'll do when you make this macro yourself is actually put whatever spell you want. So there's 3 components to this. One, the StopCasting. This isn't always relevant, but basically in the game, the way that it used to be is if you were casting, let's say you're a mage and you're casting a Frostbolt, if you had your focus spell as counterspell, the counterspell wouldn't actually go off until your Frostbolt casting was over. So you put a stop casting in, so you would instantly stop casting your Frostbolt and use the spell right away. I think that Blizzard's kind of just changed the game, so this isn't actually that important anymore, so we can actually pop that out. But there's still 2 other components we can look at. So number 1 is going to be Showtooltip with the spell name. And what this part of the macro does that a lot of people don't know is it actually shows you what icon and description will show up for your spell when you mouse over it. So if I show tooltip for this macro and I do the spell sprint, click. Now this macro that I drag onto my bars has the sprint description and icon. Does it actually cast sprint? Absolutely not, but that's what this spell does now. That is what the tooltip does in the macro. So if you wanted to set this to any ability, you can. People usually set it to the ability associated with the macro. So let's, for example, do a blind macro. So I can write blind, show tooltip blind, it will show up as blind now. And if I do /cast space square bracket at focus square bracket blind, what this macro will do is if I set myself as my focus, whoops, I forgot that I changed that macro. If I set myself as my focus, and it doesn't matter what I'm targeting, target this guard. If I hit 4, which is where it's keybound, that will focus blind, which is going to blind myself. Obviously, I can't do that, but that is one of the most simple macros, and you can apply this with any spell. The spell will apply to your focus target, which is this target right here for me right now. You can also move these frames around, by the way, if you unlock them. You can drag them around wherever you want. Okay, next up is one quick type of macro that I want to explain, and that is just a cancel aura macro. So, simply it can look like this. Ice blocks a variable here. Basically, what this macro will do is by hitting it, cancel aura actually is the same effect as right-clicking a buff. So as you can see, I have the buff Cold Blood right now up, the thing I can use from stealth. If I made a macro that said /cancel aura Cold Blood, and I drag this to my bars at number 4, since I have Cold Blood up, if I hit 4, it will cancel Cold Blood. So the main uses for this macro used to actually be to get a Holy Paladin's Blessing of Protection off of you, because a mage could spell steal it. Maybe you only needed a Blessing of Protection to get out of a stun or something, and now you don't want the enemy mage to have access to it through spell steal. So you would have a cancel aura Blessing of Protection somewhere. If you play a mage you might want to have a cancel aura ice block so you can come out of your ice block instantly instead of in the middle of a PvP match, shifting through all your different buffs trying to right click it off. These macros aren't as useful anymore, but it's still really good to know, and it's very easy to set up. It's literally / cancel aura with a space, and you type whatever spell. The next type of macro we are going to talk about is a Mouseover macro. And to do this macro, it's going to look the exact same as the focus macro, but the only difference is going to be switching the word focus with Mouseover. And what this will do is literally make you cast whatever spell is in the macro on the target that your mouse is hovering. So for example, if I jump down here, you can see, well, there's an AFK guy right here. Perfect. Obviously, if I target him and I click Q, which is my shadow step, I can shadow step. If I'm not targeting and I hit shadow step, nothing happens. If I have my mouse over and I hit shadow step, nothing happens. But since I've dragged this ability out of my bar over here, if I hit this keybind, which is the mouse over macro, I can put my mouse over him and hit that keybind, and it will make me shadow step. This can be extremely useful for classes like mages or druids that need to dispel curses. And when they dispel their curses, it might be kind of let's say you're a feral druid in an arena match and you're doing a ton of damage to somebody, you have a lot of pressure, but your healer gets hexed. Obviously, stopping attacking, targeting, clicking on your healer on his frame, targeting, and then casting the dispel and then targeting back on your player is a lot more inefficient than just putting your mouse over top of their name and hitting a macro. Mouse over macros are extremely useful. I personally know players that use Mouseover macros for almost every single friendly spell. Very important macros to know about, so definitely one of the top ones there. Another type of macro that I want to talk about really quickly is Modifier macros. I don't personally use these, and I never have, but they are something that I 100% understand, and I think it's important to know your options if you want to use the things or not. But basically, Modifier macros are macros that will allow you to have one single keybind. So like, let's say, for example, my Eviscerate was a Modifier macro. You can basically make a macro that lets you, if you hit 3, it will Eviscerate, and then if you hold shift, it will actually change what 3 will do. It'll change what the button will do. I'm not too sure how to set those up, but if you're interested in that kind of idea of using shift, control, and alt to modify your spell's keybinds, you can actually look up, just go to Google and type in World of Warcraft modifier macros, and I'm sure you can find something helpful. Okay, now we're getting into some of the best macros in the whole entire game for PvPing and improving, in my opinion. And these are the Arena 123 macros. So, what is Arena 123? Basically, these macros, they completely align with your Arena UI when you go into a match and you see 3 enemy frames. From top to bottom, they're registered as Arena 1, Arena 2, and Arena 3. So if you use a macro, like I have right here, the exact same as the Mouseover, the same as the focus, you just switch it to Arena 1, 2, or 3. What this will do is it will actually make your spell work on whatever frame that is, which completely overrides focusing, because with focus, you can only have one focus target. So maybe focus is really good in 2v2, but once you get to 3v3 and things become more situational, where there's 3 different players you might have to apply a spell to, Arena 123 dominates. The macros are really easy to set up, and I can go ahead and show you kind of an example of that, but I think it's easier to just kind of try it out yourself. I would really recommend taking like a crucial spell if you're a mage, polymorph, make a 1-2-3. If you're a rogue, do blind. These macros absolutely changed my rating in WoW the most out of any other out of any other macros I've ever used in my life, and they were probably by far the most important thing I learned about macros. So something else that you can apply with your Arena 123 knowledge is actually now using target Arena 123. One of the most common ways that players will target other players in Arena is by clicking on their frame, clicking on the player, or using their tab target macro, whether that's tab or for me the middle mouse button. But as you get higher rated, you find you might need a more convenient way to target. This is where targeting Arena 123, which is the macro you can see on screen right now, this becomes very, very strong. For me, I use 1, 2, and 3 at the back of my mouse, and those 3 keybinds alone is how I target all the enemy players that I play against. This keeps you absolutely on top of your game for switching targets. This is something that is kind of preference. The first kind of strategy works as well. I personally target with 1, 2, 3, and I use 1, 2, 3 macros. It's kind of situational, but these are very helpful. Now, for somebody like a healer that maybe doesn't need to offensively target as much, you can actually do the exact same macro backwards, where you can use a keybind to target your party members instead of offensive members. So there's one you can do where you target yourself and you target party 1, 2, 3, etc. But these are ones that I found out about many years ago that have worked fine for me. And it's basically /click space compact raid frame 1, 2, and 3. Sometimes these macros get a little buggy and you need to type /reload to reload your UI when you get into an arena or something, if they're not targeting in the right order. But it takes like 2 seconds unless you're playing on a potato, which is a fair option. Some people play on potatoes. I prefer tomatoes myself. But anyways, these targeting macros are some of the core ones for becoming a better player and avoiding being a clicker. Because being a clicker is very, very inefficient in a PvP scenario. The last type of macro that I want to break down, coming back to our boy, the legend Swifty, who kind of innovated the whole theme of this macro, and that is what we can call a one-shot macro or a Swifty macro. And this macro is kind of situational because on a lot of classes, there are certain abilities, like your offensive cooldowns, that you want to space out, but it's still a very fun macro to use, and it can be very effective. So this is basically a macro where you compile all of your bursty cooldowns into one macro. So for me, I have Cold Blood, my on-use trinket that gives me bonus versatility, Symbols of Death, which gives me a guaranteed crit and damage bonus, Shadow Blades, which gives me more combo points when I attack and bonus damage, as well as my Cold Blood for my next hit to do percentage damage as well. So this one is going to vary on your class, but it's definitely a style of macro that a lot of players use in some form or another. Anyways, guys, I tried to keep the guide pretty short and concise. I know I might have drifted off a bit on a topic or two, but macros are definitely a really important part of gameplay as you get better at the game. Thank you so much for watching. If you found something helpful, please like the video and let me know in the comments down below. Have a good fart.